Talk about low-budget flights, no food or movies? I'm out of here. I like running better. Welcome back, YouTube viewers, to another video. So, today is my 200 subscriber special. So I want to thank you all for getting so many subscribers. I mean, of course, in the grand scheme of things, 200 really isn't that much, but this channel has grown way faster than I ever could have predicted, so I'm really happy for that. But as for my 200 subscriber special, this is something I've wanted to do for a while, so I reviewed all three How to Train Your Dragon films a few months ago, and I like doing those. Those videos did pretty well too. And I even did a Hiccup character analysis a little bit later. And I've talked about these films on ranking videos before, but I just don't think I did the best job I could have done there. Of course, everybody will say about their old videos, I could have done better, but for this, I want to give a full comprehensive review of each film in the trilogy, as well as adding in a bunch of extra stuff as well. So without further ado, let's do it to it, and have one final dive, for now anyway, into the How to Train Your Dragon trilogy. Well, of course, we have to start off with the first film, and I'm going to group Hiccup, Toothless, and Aster into one section. That's what I'm going to do for a lot of these, so of course, the opening to the first film is iconic. It's kind of like the Lord of the Rings, where it's this big fantasy epic that begins with some big action scene with some narration, except this time the narration is by the main character, and this already sets up pretty much everything you need to know. You understand who Hiccup is as a character. You understand his struggles, his flaws, his relationship with his father. It's all very well done. About how he says he wants to be just like everyone else. He wants to be able to kill a dragon, but he's too weak. He's never been able to do anything. He's never been able to live up to the incredibly high expectations his father had. I mean, he even makes fun of him when he's talking to Gobber, as does an impression of Stoic and says, "Excuse me, barmaid, I ordered a son with extra guts and glory. This is a sheep," or something like that. And yeah, I just like this intro a lot. But then, eventually, Hiccup does shoot down a dragon. In fact, it's a Night Fury, which of course turns out to be Toothless. But when he's about to kill him, Toothless is tied up. He has the knife and he says, "I'm gonna kill your dragon. I'm gonna." He just cuts the rope and frees him. Then Toothless just growls at him and then walks away. This scene really leaves an impression, especially since I got to see it was on rewatch, but I got to see this in a theater this year. It was really cool to see this whole film again. Because, as I said before in an earlier video, when I saw this film for the first time, I thought it was very good. When I saw it again, I thought it was great. So yeah, but after this, Hiccup definitely has changed a bit. Because before he wanted to fight dragons, of course, just like everyone else, but after what he just went through, he just doesn't really feel comfortable with it. And Stoic, after getting a conversation with Gobber, which I'll get into later, he decides that he wants Hiccup to fight dragons. So when they both have something to say to each other. He says, "Son, I want you to fight dragons." And Hiccup says, "No, this bad time. You see, I don't want to fight dragons." And Stoic says, "Yes, you do." And Hiccup just does not want to, but of course, he has to listen to his father and he has to go into dragon training. Before we and after the first day of dragon training, he is nearly killed. And after this, he looks through the Book of Dragons, where he gets to look at all of them. He just sees how the Vikings are absolutely terrified of dragons. For literally every single one of them, it says, "Extremely dangerous, kill on sight." Extremely dangerous, kill on sight. It even has some pretty dark imagery of dragons violently killing people. And this whole montage just really, again, leaves an impression on you with the way the music goes with it and the visuals. It's all really well done. It also really shows Hiccup's fear of this. And eventually, he finds Toothless again, and that his tail's broken. He can't fly. And Hiccup tries to bond with him with, of course, probably the most iconic shot in the entire trilogy. When he puts out his hand and Toothless comes to him. This is where their friendship begins. But since Hiccup has begun to understand dragons as he's befriended Toothless, when he's in dragon training, he actually knows what he's doing and is able to stop the dragons, and everyone is really impressed. Everyone, that is, except Astrid, the girl he has a crush on. Because, well, yeah, she's impressed that he could do all of this. She's not happy like everyone else. She's thinking, how did he go from being nearly killed to being able to be such a master? And it, but during all this, as Hiccup continues to befriend Toothless, not only is he able to fix his tail off a bit, well, of course, Toothless still can't fly now unless he has a rider. So this is where Hiccup is able to train enough and is finally able to fly on Toothless. And yeah, of course, the whole test drive sequence is just amazing, amazing. One of the best scenes in any animated movie easily. The whole okay, I want to talk about it later, but just the scene is just so great. And yeah, it also shows how Hiccup now has enough trust. Hiccup and Toothless now trust each other enough to be able to do something like this. And eventually, though, Astrid finds him and tries to interrogate him, asking, "How have you been able to do all this all of a sudden? What happened?" And Hiccup just shows that he caught a Night Fury and befriended it. And he says, "If you won't listen to me, just let me show you." So the two of them go flying on Toothless in what is my favorite scene in the entire movie. The romantic flight scene is just so good. The music, the visuals, just the sheer spectacle of it all. Again, seeing this on a big screen is just something to behold for sure. And this is the third movie I've seen to do this. First there was Superman, then there was Aladdin, now there's this. And this is easily my favorite of all these versions of this type of scene. You know, the guy and the girl go flying. I like it. But now Astrid actually trusts Hiccup, and as well as Toothless. But when their last stops in their flight, they find where all the dragons even come from, their nest. And they're being controlled by a giant evil dragon called the Red Death. This thing looks like more like a dinosaur with its gigantic sharp teeth. But we'll dive into that, what happens afterward later. Now I want to talk about Stoic. So I mentioned before that toward the beginning, Stoic has a conversation with Gobber, who's really funny, by the way. Way funnier than the other comic relief characters, that's for sure, but I'll get into that later. So, I really like this scene. I think this is what this scene really tells you that this movie is actually going to have a lot more depth than you would think. I mean, the beginning already was really exciting and engaging, but this is definitely a lot more focused and nuanced, I'd say. So, Stoic is talking to Gobber about how Hiccup is just not the son he wanted. He says that when I was a boy, my father told me to hit my head against a rock. I thought it was crazy, but I did it without question. And you know what happened? I got a headache. The rock split in two. That showed me what a Viking could do, Gobber. He could, he could level mountains, tame seas. Even since I was a boy, I knew who I was, what I had to become. Hiccup, Hiccup is not that boy. Yes, this really shows how, again, because you think that Hiccup does not really listen to Stoic that much, but Stoic, he did listen to his father, and I'm sure his father listened to his father. This is just a thing that's been going on. You are told by a Viking son is told by his father, you do this, even if it's crazy, you're gonna do it. It's manly, it's tough. It shows how much strength you have. But Hiccup just can't do that. He doesn't even know who he is. And Stoic knew when he was just a boy. And Gobber tells him, well, you can't stop him, you can only prepare him. He's gonna be out there again, and he's probably already out there right now. You just have to give him a chance. And this is what leads Stoic to even telling Hiccup, hey, you're gonna fight dragons. But now we have to go into the climax, or the third act rather. So, after Hiccup is told to go into dragon training for the first time, Stoic and a bunch of other Vikings once again leave to find the dragon's nest. And when they come back, Stoic is very surprised to hear that Hiccup has this way with the beasts. He's able to do really well in dragon training. He's really impressed. So now, as the top of his class, he is going to be the one to kill a monstrous nightmare. And Stoic is just so happy he's finally going to get to see his son kill a dragon, become the son he wanted him to be. But Hiccup just doesn't do it. He just does what he did with Toothless, where he slowly puts his hand down as he says, we don't need to kill them. And Stoic is very understandably quite angry about this. This is not at all what he wanted. This is all not what he thought he was going to get. And because of this, he starts freaking out, attacking the monster's nightmare, as well as Hiccup goes crazy, and this causes Toothless to hear what's going on and show up. And he is restrained and muzzled by um, a bunch of Vikings, and I think the monster's nightmare also gets away, or rather, I think it just stays here. And Stoic is super angry at Hiccup. He doesn't even look at him, he just walks away. But Hiccup tries to plead with him. He says, "For once in your life, would you just please listen to me, Dad?" And Stoic just pushes him away and says, "You're not a Viking. You're not my son." Oh, wow. Especially on rewatch, this movie just hits on an extra level it didn't the first time I saw it for some reason. I'm not sure why exactly. The second and third hit me really hard the first time, but not the first film, as much as I enjoyed it. But yeah, this is just such a great scene. And this is where Hiccup feels completely distraught, as now the Vikings are going. Stoic is going to use Toothless, is I guess, connection with the other dragons in the Red Death to take him to the nest where all these Vikings can kill all the dragons once and for all. And Hiccup is understandably horrified at this, and he just doesn't know what to do. He's completely broken up. And Astrid is there, and she starts asking him questions after Hiccup says how he's such a failure. He says, 7 generations, and I was the first Viking in 300 years who wouldn't kill a dragon. And Astrid says, you were the first to ride one, though. And this does register a bit with Hiccup. She starts asking him, why didn't you kill Toothless? And he said, I was a coward. I was weak, okay? And she says, I want to hear the real reason. And he says, well, when I looked at him, he was scared. He was as frightened as I was. I looked at him and I saw myself. And she asks him, well, what are you going to do now? And he says, I don't know, probably something stupid. So Hiccup takes the other teenagers, Snoutlout, Fishlegs, Toughnut, and Roughnut, and has them ride their own dragons to the finale. So the other Viking ships do make it to the nest, but the Red Death is there and they are completely destroyed by this thing. And they stand absolutely no chance against this gigantic monster. But all the riders are able to show up to help stop this thing. However, it is not going to be easy to stop something this huge and terrifying. And during it, Hiccup tries to free Toothless as starts singing the boat he's on starts sinking underwater and he can't get out because he's trapped in the muzzle. But while Hiccup isn't able to free Toothless, Stoic does. And the music here is just I like the music here. The music here is the same theme that was played when Hiccup freed Toothless way earlier. That's some really nice narrative cohesion. And since Toothless is free, Hiccup is finally able to sit on his back and is going to ride on him to defeat the Red Death. But before he does, Stoic grabs him as he says he's proud. He was sorry for everything he did and said, and I'm proud to call you my son. So, with some nice strategy and knowledge of dragons and an insane action climax, Hiccup and Toothless are able to succeed in blowing up the Red Death. But it seems that while Toothless has just barely survived, Hiccup has not. And I like this scene because while we all knew Hiccup wasn't going to die, it actually lets you settle on this a bit. It really helps you feel the impact that all these characters actually think Hiccup just died. Because it settles for about a minute, but then Toothless opens up his wing and shows that Hiccup survived. And Stoic, after spending his whole life pretty much wanting to murder dragons, I mean, not totally as we see in the Hidden World, but that's later, he's able to look at Toothless and say to him, thank you for saving my son. Such a powerful scene. Then we get back to Berk in the ending. Hiccup wakes up, finds Toothless in his house, which, might I add, that was a decision that Steven Spielberg said had to be in the movie. He watched the movie after it had been mostly finished, and he told the people at DreamWorks, you did a great job, but I want Toothless to actually be right next to Hiccup when he wakes up at the end. And yeah, that was a great decision. I'm really glad he picked that. Steven Spielberg also had another very important decision to the final movie that I'll talk about when that's relevant, but Hiccup, to show that thing, he did not escape unscathed. And Hiccup wakes up, he has a peg leg. because he lost his right leg in the battle, left leg rather. I really like this. It shows that his actions had consequences. He was not going to escape this without anything happening to him. And it also contrasts him with Toothless because he's also missing a part of his body that he had to get it replaced. In this case, being that little part on his tail that helped him fly. So it's just some really nice narrative cohesion in this film. But when Hiccup opens the door, he sees that there are dragons everywhere on Berk. Everyone seems to have a dragon. What all his hard work paid off, and everyone is there to greet him as they tell him that perhaps all we needed was a little bit of this after all. Because earlier in the movie, there is a scene where everyone keeps telling Hiccup, you see this? Stop being all this. And now they're actually proud of him. Like that. And so the film ends with everyone flying away. We get some more narration, and that's that. So, conclusion on the first How to Train Your Dragon film. As I said it before, this is a great one. It's still my least favorite of the three, but I really enjoyed this one, especially on rewatch. Although, if I have any issues with it, it's that uh hmm, yeah, I guess the side characters are kind of annoying, but I'll get into that later, and they're really not that bad here. So yeah, this is one of those movies where I don't have any issues with it. I just don't really have necessarily any problems either. I just didn't enjoy it enough to give it a 100, but I'd give it about a 91. It's still great. I really love this one. But so this was a big hit, of course, and that meant it spawned an entire franchise. But before I get into the two sequels, I'm going to talk about Race to the Edge, the Netflix show, which I was able to watch on DVD. So, Race to the Edge came out after the second movie, takes place in between the first two. And this show is very good. I enjoyed it. If I have any issues with it, it's just that I don't. It's kind of dull in some places, and well, I understand why, because they didn't want to accidentally interfere with the movies or anything, but Hiccup and Toothless just don't really do much. I mean, I guess you get kind of some development with Hiccup, but you don't really get anything out of Toothless, so he just feels like he's just there. Even though the whole friendship between Hiccup and Toothless is kind of the main pillar of the trilogy. But since it didn't matter to the films, they were able to focus on the side characters more and give them a little more depth, which I liked. Uh, it's not loud, but that's kind of it. Fish Legs is okay, but Toughen and Roughen are just so annoying in this show. Sometimes they're funny, but other times they are very, very annoying, and I want to yell at them. But comes to everything else with the show, I feel like a lot of its episodes are just kind of boring, but when it's actually focused on the story, it's very good, and I like all the different dragons we get to see in this show, and I really like how the ending sets up a lot of stuff in the second movie. I'd say the villains are pretty good, well, except for the fact that this show has maybe the worst twist villain of all time, which, okay, just let me get into that really quickly. So this is a sequel to the Cartoon Network show, The Riders of Berk. And in that show, there is this comic relief guy called Trader Johan who shows up occasionally. Okay, he shows up occasionally in this show as well. But then in the season 5 finale, it's just revealed that completely out of nowhere that this guy, this random comic relief side character you saw occasionally, was the mastermind behind the entire show. Everything was according to his master plan. That was just so stupid. It's not that it doesn't make sense because it's not technically impossible. It's just so utterly ridiculous and absurd, and I have no idea how they possibly came up with that. I mean, did that really even need to happen? I feel like most about this, not much would change if you removed that. And it doesn't help that once the guy's revealed to be a villain, he doesn't change his costume or anything, or his voice is still obviously the same. There is nothing threatening about him. It's just really hard to take seriously, but overall, I still enjoyed Race to the Edge a lot. But as I did say, it does set up things in the second movie, so why not talk about the second movie? So, I like how this one begins as well. Instead of just making this one take place about, I don't know, a year or two after the original, they made it take place 5 years after the original. I like that. Because, well, one, Race to the Edge makes sense as how all of that could have happened in between movies because it's been quite a long time, 5 years. So this one begins with, I guess, the way Race to the Edge ended, where Hiccup and Toothless are just traveling around trying to find new lands after seeing so many in that show. But things do not quite go as he plans because Stoic wants Hiccup to take over as Chief of Berk. He doesn't want him to be traveling around to different lands anymore, trying to chart the world, I suppose. And Hiccup obviously does not want to do this because he just doesn't think he's ready for Chief. He tells Astrid, um, I never knew my mother. I know I'm not my father, so who even am I? Which that never really comes up that much in this movie, so I don't really know why that line is there, but it's a good line. And but Hiccup does mention earlier that he never knew his mother, which it was mentioned in the first one that yeah, his mother's dead. But later in this movie, or earlier, and after, he and Astrid find a group of dragon trappers who say they're led by some guy called Drago Bloodfist. And the dragon trappers think that they are the ones who destroyed their huge boat. And Hiccup finds the one who destroyed their huge boat, this mysterious dragon rider who does not speak at all. He just asks, "Who are you?" And then he finds out that it is his mother, who turns out to have been alive for the past 20 years. And, if I had a nickel for every time a cartoon mother left her son for incredibly stupid reasons, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened twice, right? I mean, okay, she's still better than Misako because anything is better than someone than her Misako just saying, "I know you must hate me, Lloyd, for having left you for all those years, but I had a good reason." Valka tells Hiccup, what I did was wrong, but at least I did some good stuff because unlike Misako who just left Lloyd for no reason, Valka says that when she tried to befriend the dragons, much like Hiccup did, which is where he gets his, I guess, pacifist nature from his mother, who he never even knew. Except nobody else agreed with her, and eventually one day it seemed like she got killed by dragons. So she knew that if she returned, she would just cause so much trouble that it would not be good. So she just left for 20 years, disguised as a dragon rider, finding other dragons, freeing them from the trappers, and guarding them in this sanctuary guarded by a massive alpha, which we see at the end of Race to the Edge, which I liked that. Because the whole point of Race to the Edge was the villains were trying to find the King of Dragons. And by the end of it, I was thinking, wait, they say the King of Dragons can control other dragons, and that hardly anyone's ever seen him before, and that he's huge. Wouldn't that mean it's an alpha? And then, yeah, it was an alpha. Except since Hiccup didn't actually get to see the King of Dragons, when he sees this alpha, he has no idea what it actually is. So, yeah, he sees this gigantic behemoth that is even bigger than the Red Death, I think, and just wow. Can I just talk about? I've already said this before, but the visuals in these movies are absolutely incredible. It shows how a big CGI infested 2.5 hour live action blockbuster is definitely not the be all end all of cinema. A movie that is an hour and a half with cool effects and actual good writing is the be all end all of cinema. But so Hiccup gets to spend some time with his mother he never knew and gets to see a bit more about all these different types of dragons. And we get another flying sequence. Each movie has 2 flying sequences, and what's great about all of these is that, well, the second movie, the flying sequences have about 1 or 2 lines of dialogue. They pretty much have none. The ones in the first and third have no dialogue. They are purely carried by the visuals and music, which are arguably the best thing about these movies, which I'd want to say the writing is, because the writing is fantastic, but the music and visual are just really, really good here. But I'll talk about the flying with mother sequence later. The whole point is that this sequence is just really cool looking, has amazing music. Fun fact, it was almost cut from the movie, but the people at DreamWorks loved the music so much they said, okay, keep it. But eventually, Stoic and both Gobber find Hiccup after trying to find where he went because he just disappeared out of the blue. And they find that Valka has been alive for 20 years and never just made it seem like they all thought she was dead for that entire time. And as she's telling Stoic, her husband who she hasn't seen for 20 years, she's telling him that, yeah, I know you hate me. I know you're gonna be so mad at me. So you know what? Why don't you just yell it? Yell at me, okay? But he just doesn't. He's just so happy to see his wife again because that's all he needs. He's confused, sure, but that's not what's important to him. And that's just a really touching scene. But after this, a they all the dragon trappers arrive as they have found the sanctuary and want the alpha. And Hiccup, Toothless, Stoic, Valka, as well as a ton of other Birkins who show up, engage in this gigantic Lord of the Rings-esque battle sequence that is just amazing. In fact, I'd say this might be the best big battle I've ever seen in any movie. And this isn't even the climax. This is just the second act. Because, well, the second act climax is definitely not as big. It has more emotional power, which is what the climax should have. The second act action should just be really cool, and this is really cool. The visuals are outstanding here. But during it, Toothless is mind controlled by another alpha because Drago just had another one that he found, and he mind controls Toothless to shoot Stoic, and he dies. This totally caught me off guard. I would definitely not have expected Stoic to die, and after he did, I was thinking that, well, if he were gonna die, wouldn't they have just saved that for the third movie? But no, they did it in the second one, and he's even killed off by Toothless, which is something any other movie would just be too afraid to do. But no, this one did it, and they played this seriously. There is no jokes here, nothing lighthearted. They play this completely straight, and this leads to the actual funeral sequence, which is great. Which another interesting thing to say about this is that it was not going to look like this. Because the way it is here is they put Stoic's body on a boat and they all launch flaming bow and arrows to the boat, which I guess cremates him. Originally, they were supposed to just have all the characters carry Stoic's body to Burke, but the higher ups at DreamWorks said, no, that's too dark, that's a little too sad. But I think this was a way better decision. I think all the fans can agree on it, which also another fact, Stoic was not supposed to die. It was going to be Cobber for some reason. But then some executive told the director, wouldn't it make more sense for Stoic to die? And it would also just serve the story better. And he said, yeah, you're right. So that was Guillermo del Toro, so he got a creative consultant credit. But this whole funeral scene is just amazing. The music once again, which music here is a sad orchestral version of the song that Stoic and Valka sing earlier, which is a really nice touch, and Galber gets a really touching speech here, and of course Hiccup gets a speech here, as he talks about how he says, I was so afraid to become my dad, mostly because I never thought I could. How do you become someone so great, so selfless? I guess you can only try. And his mother goes up to him and tells him, you came early into this world. Um, I feared you wouldn't make it, but your father, he never doubted you. Knew that one day you'd become the strongest of us all, and he was right. You have the heart of a chief and the soul of a dragon. That is who you are, son. And this is able to give Hiccup the confidence he needs, kind of like, I guess, Simba and the Lion King with the whole remember who you are sequence. And even though the Drago's Alpha was able to take control of all of the dragons, it only took control of all the adult dragons. All the baby dragons, which I mentioned earlier, don't listen to anyone, are still completely fine. So the riders all fly him into the final battle. But before I talk about the final battle, I should talk about the villain, Drago Bloodfist. So first of all, I just found this hilarious image I had to show here. I'd say it pretty much speaks for itself. Which one's a better villain though, Kai or Drago? I guess Drago, because Kai is just okay. Well, okay. Before I actually talk about Drago, I have to say that his whole big ah scream made me laugh hysterically every single time he did it. Which because whenever else he's speaking, he actually is pretty intimidating. When we did that scream, I just could not help but laugh. Probably should have handled that a little better, movie, but whatever. It's a nitpick. So Drago is a pretty simple villain. As Hiccup tells him during the second act battle, how, why would you even do all this? What do you have to gain from building a dragon army? To become unstoppable? To rule the world? Dragons bring people together. And then Drago reveals that one of his arms is a prosthetic, and that he lost an arm in a dragon attack years ago. He talks about how when he was a boy, he lost everything to the beasts, and how they are nothing. They tear people apart, but he can use them as a tool so that they can never fight back against him. He can always control them, and with the Alpha, he can definitely control all of them. But Hiccup is just able to tell him, or maybe you need dragons to control people. And he says, "Ha ha, clever boy," which, yeah, I don't think he's that clever for figuring that out. But anyway, this is just a really well done scene. As it continues, Hiccup still doesn't agree with him. He's saying that, how could you possibly do this? Because earlier, when Hiccup first heard about Drago from Stoic, he was telling him how, I can just change his mind about trying to conquer the world. I could change your mind. Stoic tells him, you're not going to change that man's mind. He kills without reason. You can never reason with him ever. And while Hiccup is continuously steadfast in the idea that he can change anyone's mind, after he sure doesn't think that now, when he tell when Hiccup tells him, I can show you that dragons can help people. And Drago just tells him, no, let me show you. And that is what causes Stoic to die. And eventually, and there's also just this really cool battle between the two alphas during the second act. And the first alpha, the good one, is killed. Drago's alpha wins. And he is heading to Berk to conquer the rest of the dragons, destroy the Berkians, and truly begin his conquest of the world. And this is where we get to the movie's absolutely amazing, amazing climax. So, as Hiccup and the rest of the Astra and the rest of the riders fly on the baby dragons to the climax, Hiccup pleads with Toothless, who Drago is riding now as he controls him. Really makes it hate him even more as a villain. And Hiccup pleads with him how he says, you're my best friend. You have to fight his control. You would never do this. Or something to that effect. And Hiccup is able to actually break Drago's control over Toothless. And before I get into what happens next, I have to say that I've heard some people say that this moment should work because it's so emotional and it's really well done, but because Toothless is pretty much just there for most of the movie, you don't really care about any of this. Unlike the first and third, where Toothless is continuously super important. But what I would say is that Toothless is still there for all of it. And what else would he have done other than what he actually did? And two, if you are watching this movie, I am 99% sure you saw the first. If you did, then you would care about their bond between Hiccup and Toothless. You don't need 10,000 more scenes telling you why you should care, because you already do. So when Hiccup is able to break Toothless away from Drago, you do genuinely feel this. And this is where Hiccup is able to... another iconic shot where Hiccup sits on Toothless, and Toothless powers up, all the dragons fly around, and Hiccup is able to proudly proclaim to Drago, this is what it is to earn a dragon's trust. And Toothless challenges the Alpha and defeats it. He blows off one of its horns, and Drago also falls into the water and dies. Because he was so obsessed with controlling everything that as soon as the balance of power had shifted away from his favor, it leads to his death. And the Alpha, while not dead, is able to respect Toothless and leave. It also was a cameo in the Hidden World. Pretty nice touch. And another thing I have to briefly talk about is that Drago's death scene here, it is made in a way so that you could say he died, but you could also get away with saying that no, he lived, because he was supposed to come back in the third film. But Steven Spielberg said no. He didn't want him to be in there, not because he thought it would be a better storytelling decision, he just said that make a new villain because showing Drago would remind people of Stoic's death, and that might be a little too sad, which I think that's a stupid reason. But I think just saying that Drago is dead was a much better choice. Because, especially with the villain in the third movie, both of these villains are able to drive home major themes of the trilogy in different ways. We didn't need Drago to come back, and it's not like he was the most interesting villain, let's be honest. And if I had to hear that, it would be pretty weird to be in the big epic finale of a trilogy and hear the villain do that goofy scream again, have me laugh at him a bunch. That probably wouldn't have been the best idea. And yeah, now Toothless is the alpha dragon. And I remember I've heard some other people say about this, which is that this feels very much like an episode of Pokemon, where it's still a good movie, but Hiccup and Drago's conflict over whether or not dragons deserve to be among people feels very much like Ash versus Team Rocket saying that no, Pokemon are our friends. They're not tools. Toothless, use Hyper Beam. But I don't think it feels like that, funny as that is. But since Stoic is dead, Hiccup is now Chief of Berk. We get one more shot of narration, and that's how the movie ends. So, conclusion on the second film, great. Even better than the first, I'd say. Well, I wouldn't say it's way, way better than the first like I did in my original review of it. I'd still say this is better than the first. I only have one problem with this movie, which I'll get into later. Other than that, this is kind of flawless. The visuals are outstanding. The music is great. The acting is really solid. It continues the themes and ideas of the first film. It's a perfect sequel. What more could you want from it? Oh, the action, of course. I mean, I've heard some complaints about this one that I can definitely understand. People saying stuff like, Valka doesn't actually do that much, which is kind of true, but I think she does enough to justify her inclusion in the film, so it's fine with me. Or some people say that Drago Bloodfist is just straight up an embarrassing villain, which I wouldn't say he's an embarrassing villain. Yes, the scream is funny. I've said that already. When it comes to everything else, he's intimidating. His backstory may not be the most interesting, but it works. So who cares if he's more of a plot device than a character? Not every villain needs to be a Zuko. So, time to dive on into the third film, which is probably my favorite animated movie ever. So, this one begins with showing how it's been another year since the second film, and since they kept rescuing dragons over the years, Berk has now become so flooded with dragons that it is really hard to live because nobody can get around anywhere without being hit by one. Because as Hiccup is saying that his hard work has paid off. This was his dream for people and dragons to live together, but is this really the best idea? I mean, things are not going so well here. And Hiccup is continuously reminded of this. And he's even told that now that he's been chief for a year, he's done all this, he should get married to Astrid. And of course, the two of them don't want to get married. But Hiccup is reminded after being told of so many times of how the dragons are flooding Berk. If you remember something his father talked about when he was little, he was obsessed with it. The hidden world, which an old legend told by sailors about how on the edge of the world there is a hidden place that it's not a nest for dragons like in the first film. It is actually where all of them come from. And Hiccup thinks that we can find the hidden world and we can all live there with the dragons peacefully and we'll never be in any danger from trappers or hunters or anything. Of course, there's no confirmation that the hidden world actually exists, but we'll get more into that later. So, during Hiccup's conversation with Astrid, Toothless stumbles across a Light Fury. No, the Light Fury is not the only other Night Fury. Toothless is the last Night Fury. The Light Fury is a subspecies, so the villain effectively finds the Light Fury and sends it out to, I guess, trick Toothless because Toothless is now hopelessly in love with her, which is pretty funny, I have to say. So now Toothless is totally not concentrated on anything else that's happening other than the Light Fury. And Hiccup is also thinking, he tells his plan about trying to find the hidden world to everyone else at Berk, and they all tell him that, you're crazy, we can't abandon our home of 7 generations, we've lived here for 300 years. And Aster and Eret, son of Eret, just tell everyone, you're going to listen to him, he's the chief. And Hiccup is able to stand there in one of his few moments of confidence in this movie and say that, I know my father left me to protect this place, to protect us. And I say that Berk isn't a place. Berk is a people. Berk is wherever we go. So they're all willing to go along with his plan to find the hidden world, which thing I want to mention about this scene is that I listened to some of the director's commentary and, well, director, producers, some animators. They talked about how this scene is interesting because Hiccup is very confident here, but for the rest of the movie until the very end, he is very unconfident confident in himself. So it definitely contrasts the rest of it, which is a nice touch. So on their quest to find the hidden world, they all find this island. They want to camp out on for the night, which but everyone agrees that we should stay here. This will be New Burke. And Hiccup is saying that no, we can't stay here. We have to find the hidden world, guys. Well, they will be our home to achieve our dream of humans and dragons uniting. And this is where the major theme of this movie starts to come into play. Letting go. As Hiccup is continuously obsessed with the idea that his dream of man and dragons uniting has to always be true. We always have to follow it. And that whenever Toothless leaves, is when he lets Toothless go on to find the Light Fury, he's told that, Hiccup, Toothless probably isn't going to come back. And he's thinking, what? But he has to come back. And he's continuously reminded that you're going to have to let Toothless go someday. He's not going to be there forever. But Hiccup just can't accept that yet. He's not ready to let go. He still is so hardened into his original ideas and views that he just can't accept this. And speaking of Toothless going to find the Light Fury, we get another flying sequence. And this the first one in this film, and this is probably my least favorite of the flying sequences, but it's still very good. Because I mentioned that the first and the second film's flying sequences have about one or two lines of dialogue in them. This one goes back to the first movie where there is no dialogue during the flying sequences. It is purely visual and the music. It is so good. Although it's probably the least interesting because cool looking as it is and as beautiful as the music is, it's still mostly just two dragons flying around in the clouds at night, so it's kind of hard to see what's happening, but still cool. But the Toothless and the Light Fury just leave. They go to the hidden world. So Hiccup and Astrid ride Stormfly, Astrid's dragon, and they find the hidden world. And this is maybe the most visually stunning thing I've ever seen in any movie, any TV show. The discovery of the hidden world is just amazing. How did they animate this? I listened to the director's commentary on this scene, and they said that animating this was nearly impossible. With the amount of the bioluminescence with different colors and shapes and types of dragons, it's just so hard to do. But they also were also careful to make sure the hidden world actually looked like a world. The Dragon Sanctuary from the second film was supposed to be a sanctuary, practically just an overgrown cave, but this is an actual world, and it looks like an actual world. Just everything about this scene is so amazing. And Hiccup and Toothless see that since, they did already know that Toothless is kind of the alpha dragon, so he is the king of dragons now. But Hiccup and Toothless are found by some other dragons and are chased away. Toothless, despite being king now, is still loyal to Hiccup, and he helps him and Astrid escape. But Hiccup, Toothless looks kind of disappointed about having to leave his people and the hidden world, and this is where Hiccup finally looks like he's starting to question that, should I really continuously be going after Toothless, hoping that he can stay with me forever? Because this is where I have to get into another important part of this film, the flashbacks. So, Stoic died in the second movie, we all know that. But here, he is in two flashbacks, which I really like, both to when Hiccup was just a boy. The first one is about how Hiccup even knew about the hidden world. When he was little, Stoic told him about how there is the legend of the hidden world, a place on the edge of the planet that is the home of all dragons. And in the first film, Stoic was very dead set on killing all dragons. We can see here that probably the only reason he was so obsessed with killing them is because he couldn't find the hidden world. In this movie, we find out that he didn't want to kill all dragons. He just wanted to close the hidden world so that they couldn't even come to interact with humans, so that both sides would be safe. But after he found out that that just wasn't going to happen, he just had no choice but to kill all of them. But the second flashback is what Hiccup actually remembers in this scene, and this is far more important to the themes of this film, which is that Hiccup asked Stoic if his father would ever remarry, and he says that, I don't want another wife. Your mother was the only woman for me. She was the love of my life. And with love comes loss, son. Sometimes it hurts. But in the end, it's part of the deal. But in the end, it's worth it. There was no greater gift than love. And again, this is where Hiko finally starts to realize that he does have to let Toothless go. Both of them are the leaders of their people. They can't just go on like this forever. But now is where we finally have to discuss this film's villain, Grimmel the Grizzly. He is kind of like Drago Bloodfist 2.0 and a lot better. You should watch my top 10 DreamWorks villains, and all I'll say is that he was on that list. He's definitely not the best, but he's definitely a top 10 villain for sure. So, but here's the key difference between him and Drago. Drago wanted to just conquer dragons, use them to rule the world. He was a trapper. Grimmel is a hunter. He just wants to kill all of them. He is also way more of a strategist, a mastermind, which nice detail I didn't notice when I first watched this film is that there's a reference to Vigo from the Race to the Edge, who is pretty much just a beta Grimmel. You know, a dragon hunter who is a smart, cunning mastermind who's able to outsmart Hiccup. Hiccup and Astrid even say, we've dealt with his kind before. But his goal is that he thinks, who cares if Hiccup isn't able to do so much? He's just a boy, not a real chief. And that he has a Night Fury, but he says, I am the Night Fury killer. Because it turns out this guy killed all of the other ones. So he wants to catch Toothless, kill him, and finally have rid the world of Night Furies. Because to him, dragons are not even close to equal to humans. They aren't even worthy of being around. To him, they are savage animals that all deserve to be slaughtered. And we have an intimidating scene where he finally confronts Hiccup for the first time. As he tells him how, father, now he was a hunter, one of the greatest who ever lived. He had it right, trying to destroy the beast so that you could live in a better world. And Hiccup tells him he changed his mind. And then Grimmel just stares him down and says, and look where that got him. This guy is the gall to insult Hiccup's dead father. And then he stuns Hiccup and tells him that he's not going to stop until he catches Toothless and says that you have never seen anything like me. And yeah. So throughout the movie, he is continuously able to catch up to our heroes and elude them at every single turn. And this is where I finally have to talk about the annoying side characters, which pretty much everyone does not like. Because there's a certain part where he's able to capture Ruffnut, and he has to listen to her babble on forever, and is so annoyed he eventually just lets her go. And I have to say that the first time I watched these movies, I thought that the side characters were fine in the first movie, incredibly annoying in the second, and better than the second, but not as good as the first and the third movie. But on rewatch, I can say that, honestly, I kind of found them a little funny in the third movie. In the second movie, they could be funny, but that whole subplot with Ruffnut being obsessed with Eret, son of Eret, was just so annoying, and you could cut it and practically nothing would change. They really should have cut that. Who thought that was funny? Wasn't weren't the other jokes comedic characters had enough? And well, they only did it once or twice. They also did kind of break the tension in scenes in the second movie, which is definitely not a good thing. I mean, when Drago's talking about how I will control all the dragons, they all just say, no, no, you don't. But all in all, they're not the worst. I think maybe after I watched Race to the Edge, I just saw how annoying they could actually be, so now I'm just numb to them. But since Ruffna has escaped, Grimmel is smart in letting her escape. Now, he just follows her to find where all the other Vikings are, and he's able to capture Toothless and the Light Fury. Right after they save Hiccup and Hiccup and Astrid. And did Grimmel capture the dragons too easily? Yeah, but I don't really care that much. I mean, it had to happen for the plot, so it's not that big a deal. And this is where Hiccup is just completely destroyed. Because remember, remember when his father talked to him about how with love comes loss. But Hiccup still doesn't really know what to do without Toothless. He's never really been without him before. And when he was a loser. Bastard is able to tell him, a scene that is very similar to that famous scene all the way back from the first one, where she talked to him about how, why didn't you kill Toothless? Here, she's talking to him about how you you are not nothing without Toothless. She says that you are the most stubborn, knuckle-headed guy I know. Toothless didn't give that to you. He just made it easier. And this is able to give Hiccup just that little boost of confidence he needed, once again thinking that it's true. He is still worthy on his own. He still has value. He doesn't need Toothless forever. And since for the past two movies, the characters have had wingsuits to fly with their dragons. So they all fly their wingsuits to catch up to Grimmel's armada and free the dragons and stop him once and for all. And the climax of this movie is arguably better than the second. I'm not really sure because it's definitely not as cool visually, which is not supposed to be. This one is more about the emotion rather than the action, but when it comes to which climax is more emotionally powerful, I think they're tied. It's kind of hard to pick, but eventually, well, Hiccup is able to free Toothless and the Light Fury. He and Grimmel are now falling to their doom. They are going to drown in the ocean. But there's a key difference between these two. Hiccup trusted the dragons. He learned to make real bonds with them. Grimmel, he was just a hunter. He hated all of them. So Toothless is saved by the Light Fury. It, Hiccup was so loyal to Toothless for all these years, the Light Fury understands that, is able to save him, while Grimmel falls to his doom. Because he never made time to make any real connections with anyone or anything. He only cared about himself, so he dies by himself. And once everyone is saved, Hiccup finally makes a choice. He has to let the dragons go. He understands that the times he had with Toothless, he was his best friend, will always matter. They and they always have those memories, but they both have to lead their respective tribes, and that with trappers and hunters always going to be after dragons, the world just isn't safe for them. They have to go live in the hidden world, maybe forever, but one day the dragons will be able to return in peace. As Hiccup says, our world doesn't deserve you. Yet, anyway. All the riders have to say goodbye, and this scene is just... I always cry during this part. But I'm glad it does. It really shows how powerful this is. When I first watched this, I didn't really realize until then just how much I cared about these characters until they had to let go. And now that everything has gone back, now the dragons have left, Hiccup and Astrid make the decision to get married, and then we get a 10 years later scene, where Hiccup and Astrid are with their kids on a boat as they come to the edge of the world, where a few dragons have come out to sea, are out there. Toothless, the Light Fury, and their little baby dragons. And they slowly approach them. Toothless at first does not even know who these people are. But he sniffs Toothless, or he sniffs Hiccup, and then his eyes widen and he realizes that this is his old friend he hasn't seen in a decade. And Hiccup, Astrid, and their family are able to go flying on Toothless and Stormfly, who's back. It's a nice touch. And that's how the movie ends. As the final scene, as Hiccup's narration says that, we'll guard the secret of the dragons until the day they can return in peace. Title drop, and then we get this great credit sequence that shows a bunch of iconic scenes of different parts in the movie. Hiccup, the trilogy, Hiccup bonding with Toothless for the first time, the romantic flight scene, Hiccup proclaiming a Drago, this is what it is to earn a dragon's trust, and of course the final scene of this movie. So, conclusion of the third film, easily my favorite of the trilogy. The visuals are the best they ever are, even though the flying sequences are best in the first movie. The music continues to be amazing, the characters are at their best, the themes are the strongest. This is just such a great one. I will never understand how there are people that say this is a bad conclusion. If you just merely didn't like this one, then that's fine. But to the people who say, this movie's inconsistent with the first two, I just want to tell you, did you actually pay attention to these movies? I mean, really? They're gonna say that, but all the dragons had to leave at the end. The whole point of the first two is about how humans and dragons have to unite, bozo. And to that I say, the whole point of these movies is about growing up and maturity. and this ending is about maturity. The director/writer of the entire trilogy, Dean DeBlois, said that he was worried that people would hate him for this ending, but he knew that this is the only way it could have ended. He had planned this ending since the first film had just finished its theatrical run. Hoped that this ending would leave people emotionally satisfied, and while it's true that this one definitely does have its detractors, overall this movie is still quite well received. Critics loved it, and most of the fans loved it, so still made money. That really counts, right? So before I close out this video once and for all, I'm going to talk about the cast and crew really quickly. A few of the actors: Jay Baruchel as Hiccup, America Ferrera as Astrid, Gerard Butler as Stomach, and Craig Ferguson as Gobber are all great. Normally I hate celebrity castings, but what I think works about these guys is that they aren't necessarily celebrities. I mean, they're not real voice actors, but they're not really celebrities. And I think they all did really good jobs. They were all well cast. Well, I'd say that not every character in these. I'd say some of the characters in these movies should have been recast as real voice actors. Tough Nut, Rough Nut for sure. I guess maybe Drago. I don't know. I think Kevin Michael Richardson should have played Drago, because he already kind of sounds like that. So if they just got him to sound like the Shredder, that would be perfect. Then there's also the writers directors of these films, Dean DeBlois and Chris Sanders. So these two did Lilo and Stitch, and then they did the first How to Train Your Dragon. And Chris Sanders left, so the sequels are purely Dean DeBlois. And boy, these two are creative geniuses. I mean, Chris Sanders was also in a major part in The Lion King, and he's writing and directing The Wild Robot. This man has never failed me before, and I hope he's not gonna fail us now. As for Dean DeBlois, his next movie after directing the greatest film series of all time, in my opinion, is a live-action remake of How to Train Your Dragon. Look, I don't know why he's writing and directing the remake that's coming out next year, but all I can say is he was probably forced into it. I cannot buy that he would actually chose to do it. He was either A, forced into it, or B, he just did it to make sure that it still had some semblance of what the original film was like. Although the actors said they're going to change quite a lot, so we'll just have to see how that goes. But the direction in these films is really good. So is the writing, especially. They're all very well paced. Pacing is very important because, on the one hand, you have a movie like The Lion King, where there is not a single bit of filler. Every single second has something to do with the film. Then you have movies like your average day blockbuster, where they're just stuffed to the brim with so much boring filler. They have to be as long as humanly possible. But once again, these films prove that it shows that animation proves that a movie doesn't need to be 2 hours. The Hidden World is the longest DreamWorks movie, and it is only an hour 44 minutes, including credits. I mean, the longest animated movie I can think of is Incredibles 2, which is an hour 58 minutes, and that movie was terrible, but it still didn't really have that much filler. So, then I have to talk about the music. John Powell's score here in this trilogy is legendary. There's a reason the music here is as loved as it is. I mean, if you want to know other films he's done, he and Hans Zimmer did the first two Kung Fu Pandas, and he also worked with Harry Gregson Williams on the first Shrek and Chicken Run. So he's a very talented composer. I also appreciate that he actually knows what movies are worth his time. Is a movie like Migration very good? No. But he chose to compose that over Deadpool. No, really, he was actually thinking about Deadpool once. Because he was told, it's not the same as other superhero movies, it's different. And then he saw it and thought, it is just more endless fights. That's what he says about superhero movies. They are all endless fights. And he hates that. He only did one or two superhero movies, and they were exhausting to him. He did not like doing them. Well, these movies have action. They are more than just action. They have actual depth and meaning behind them. And they really are mostly about the characters. And he says that he likes animation more than live action. I'm pretty sure he said that once. And he says that there's no actor better than an animator. Really gotta respect this guy. And I mean, this whole trilogy soundtrack is full of so many great songs. Test Drive, This Is Burke, Romantic Flight, Forbidden Friendship. Stoic Ship, Flying with Mother, Furies in Love, Once There Were Dragons. The vocal songs by Yonzi, I think it's pronounced. Those are very good too. Now I'm gonna rank all 6 flying scenes. The last place is Furies in Love from the Hidden World. It's really good, but as I said before, it's just not as interesting as the others. Number 5, The Discovery of the Hidden World. While visually this is the best one, it's because of the music that I don't put it at number 4 instead it's at number 5. Because the music here is still great, but it's not very hummable. But I mean the music is still very good and the visuals are absolutely amazing. Truly breathtaking. I mean, all of these flying sequences are great. At number 4 is Flying with Mother from the second film. Again, the reason this is at number 4, not number 5, is because the music is just outstandingly hummable. The visuals are also really impressive too, even though they're visually, this is maybe the weakest of the flying sequences, but it's still fantastic. Number 3, the Where No One Goes sequence from the second movie. Okay, the song Where No One Goes is something that all the fans love. Who doesn't love it? It's great. And the fact that I had it play over this flying sequence is just, it's so, something I think I can describe all these sequences are they're all majestic. The song playing with these visuals of Hiccup and Toothless soaring above the clouds and with so much freedom and the spirit they have, it's just so inspiring and moving, really. I wish I could see the second and third in theaters. Number 2, the first sequence, Test Drive from the very first film. Musically, this is the best out of them all. Easily. Well, maybe not easily, but... And visually, it's incredibly impressive. You truly get the scope of what it feels like to fly in this one. But number 1, Romantic Flight from the first film. When I saw this in theaters, I was just completely blown away by it. Even though it's set at night like Furies in Love, you can have more of a sense of what's happening. You just hear the music playing with the visuals and seeing them all soar above the clouds through the sunset, looking over Burke. It's truly beautiful. Okay, conclusion. Well, I pretty much said everything I wanted to do about these films. I don't really have anything left to add about this trilogy. I have said my piece. When the live action remake comes out next year, there is no way I'm going to watch it, but I'll see the trailer. I'm sure I'll make a video on the trailer. So in conclusion, this is my favorite film series of all time. Indiana Jones is a close second, maybe Kung Fu Panda is a close second, I don't know, but there's something about these films that just hit me harder on a... These ones just hit me on a deeper level than the other movies I've seen just didn't. Because they just feel so complete in a sense. And since the story had the exact same people working on it throughout its entire run, it truly feels cohesive. I mean, Kung Fu Panda was also planned out, and that also had mostly the same people. But the second and third film had a different director than the first one. I mean, you still can't tell because they're all very consistent, but this trilogy especially hits on a harder level. For some people, this is my Toy Story. I may not have grown up with it, but it's... Some people will say, Toy Story is my favorite. Some people will say, mine's Kung Fu Panda. Some people will say Shrek. But for me, my favorite is How to Train Your Dragon. So, I want to thank you all again for 200 subscribers. This has been a very long video, but I'm very happy to make it, so comment down below what you thought. That's all for now, and as always, keep on juicing.